Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastichade Shatani Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivrenda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchkalpatarubhyas chakri prasindubhya eva cha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Bhaktivinodaya Satchidananda Namane, Gaura Shakti Swarupaya, Rupanuga Variety. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ki jai. Well, it's a wonderful occasion, the appearance day of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And, you know, these appearance days, of course, we just had Radhastami, a couple of days ago. And then not at all long before that was Janmastami, Krishna Janmastami, Prabhupada's Vyasa Puja. It's just all really wonderful. And, you know, we should try to familiarize ourselves with, Krishna, Prabhupada, Radharani, but the devotees like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and others who are in our line, but not, quite as famous as Krishna or Lord Chaitanya, and those super personalities. But they're really important, and Srila Prabhupada made it clear that in Krishna consciousness we have there's so many occasions, festive events, and there's so many appearance days, so many disappearance days, and so many days when different transcendental incidents happened. Prabhupada made the point that we could have a festival every single day. We could have more than that. We could have 3, 4, 5 festivals every day. That's one of the beauties of Krishna consciousness. But we've got these great transcendental giants, amazing transcendental personalities like Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And we should try to familiarize ourselves with them and what happened, what they did, and where they were and where they did things, and so on like that. So anyway, we'll do a little bit of that sort of thing right now. Some of you, I imagine, some or many of you have been in such a class before on the appearance day of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But let's run through some of the events in his life and some of the very special things which he did, which he was responsible for, and which happened. Well, yes, so Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur appeared in this world on this very day in 1838. Here we are, 2023, so in 15 years, it will be the 200th anniversary of the appearance of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Then I guess we'll have some special programs. So he appeared in 1838, and his childhood, I don't have so many of the specific details, but basically in a broader sense, his childhood was a little, what would you say, sort of, well, he got moved around a lot, put it that way. and his relatives. He wasn't always staying with his parents. With his grandfather, he stayed with aunts and uncles, and then they had a big establishment somewhere in Bengal or maybe northern Orissa, that sort of area. And then they went bankrupt and lost everything, and they had to move, and so he was living under different circumstances here and there during his early years. And it was kind of, you could say, unstable situation, something like that. You see, MTech. Did you know? MTech. Look at this. They say, no. Don't touch it. This is high-tech, MTech. If he was just a B-tech, it would just be rubber bands or something. It's okay. No problem. So yeah, his early days were like that, kind of here and there and around, and not like a nice stable family situation with his parents who were, like a stable couple, but it was, kind of unstable situation. So he got married to his first wife at the age of 12. His wife was 5. Hare Krishna. Times have changed. So, anyway, she passed away, after some years, a fair number of years later. She gave birth to, I forget how many children, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur had, something like 12 children, or something along those lines. And around half of them or something, she was, the first wife was the mother of. So he was very intelligent, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He went to school and he studied philosophy, and at some point in his teenage years, he heard about Lord Chaitanya. Before that he heard a little bit, but nothing so much. But he really heard about Lord Chaitanya when he was in his early teens. And he met some devotees who explained some of the philosophy of Lord Chaitanya to him. Achintya Abhed Tattva, and about the Sankirtan Yajna being the Yuga Dharma, the main religious activity for Kali Yuga. So when he heard about these things at, maybe 13, 14, 15, whatever it was, he really became excited about Lord Chaitanya, what Lord Chaitanya had done, and his teachings, and his predictions. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he made up his mind, I've got to get a set of Chaitanya Charitamrita. However, he couldn't find a set of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Although this is in Bengal, and it is classic Bengali literature. And he looked, but he couldn't find a set of Chaitanya Charitamrita. Just as Mother Tirumala was saying, back in the old days, sometimes we talk about the good old days Well, really back in the old days, she said, if you wanted a set, or if you just wanted any book, a book like Bhagavad Gita, which is just in one volume, you had to put in an order and come back in a year or so. And if you wanted a set of Srimad Bhagavatam, you had to put in your order and come back maybe 10 years later, because they had to do it by hand. So for all those years, finally when he was 25, he managed to find a set of Chaitanya Charitamrita in Bengali, which is the language it's written in. So anyway, through that contact he had in his teenage years, he really became convinced that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the most important person, and his teachings and all the things he revealed are the most important things that people need to know. But anyway, like he said, he couldn't get a copy. But although he was looking around quite regularly, when he left school, because he was, like I mentioned, he was highly intelligent, he learnt several languages: Bengali, Hindi, Sanskrit, Persian, Urdu, English. What's that? I ran out of fingers. Several languages, and it means like he really knew them. He knew those languages. He could read, write, converse, even like lecture in all these languages. So he's a very brilliant person. Learning a whole new language, gee, it's not a small thing. But he was very expert like that. And his English was very good. When I first went to India, that was 1976, it was uncommon, even in the cities, to meet people who spoke English, even like practically at all. Yeah. So now we're talking about in the 19th century, maybe. He was born 1838. This is now, he's left school, so it's maybe 1860 or something along those lines. He's in his 20s. And because his English was so good, and just in general he was so intelligent, he was offered a job in the government service. Well, actually he was offered a job as a teacher of English in the government service, because, as I was saying, in those days, for people to know English like really competently, they were just few and far between. So he was doing very well as a teacher. He was doing really well as a teacher of English in the schools. In fact, he did so well. His English was so good. He was so expert at communicating. In his early 20s or so, sometime in his 20s, he was offered a job as a magistrate. Now, we don't have any lawyers here. Anyway, magistrate. He didn't have an LLB either. In fact, he had not studied law at all. His qualification was he spoke very good English. Therefore, they gave him the job. Yeah. And very quickly he rose to the level of being a deputy magistrate. This is, of course, British India. And deputy magistrate was the highest post that any Indian person could get under the British government. You couldn't become like the head magistrate. That was always an Englishman. But because they weren't so much into learning the local languages, they were more like ceremonial types of figures, who they just make speeches at government events, that sort of person. But the actual work, the hearing of the cases and all that was done by the local people, who were, some of them were deputy magistrates. So he advanced in the government service, as I said, and eventually he got posted to Jagannath Puri as the deputy magistrate, which basically meant, as I was saying, that he was effectively the head of the whole thing. Means he would hear the cases, that he would do, but he would run the sort of the legal office for that area. And he had many major responsibilities. One responsibility he had was that he was in charge of the Jagannath temple in Jagannath Puri. Yeah, the actual Jagannath temple. And they were, up till that time, they were sort of a kind of disorganized organization, the Jagannath temple. Yeah, very disorganized. They would not, they didn't have set times for all the different functions we have, if you're familiar, like waking the deities, having a Mongol arati, offering food to the deities, and changing their clothes and whatnot. It was all just sort of anything goes pretty much. But Bhaktivinoda Thakura, he standardized all the functions in the Jagannath temple. And as I'm told, at least, basically those standards are still being adhered to today. Yes. So at least that's what I've heard. Yeah, it's quite a setup, the Jagannath temple. If you've had Jagannath Mahaprasad, you'd know they don't use, can you now fasten your seatbelts, at least many of you. They don't use chilies. Hare Krishna. Because chilies are introduced. They're not native, or whatever you'd say, to India. Potatoes, cauliflower, peas, beans. Can you imagine? Yeah, so they don't have anything which is not strictly native to India. So anyway, he organized it, all the different preparations, the particular preparations. And if you go there, I went there first 1979 to Puri, and you get the same preparations every single day full stop. Yeah, we went there and we had, anyway, I won't describe them, but the same preparations as we had just before COVID was the last time I went there. Same thing. Exactly the same. Absolutely exactly the same. So he standardized the things like the timings, the standards of cleanliness, etc., etc. So there he was now in Jagannath Puri, and he's the deputy magistrate. One thing he found out, and he had to do the bookkeeping and all the keeping track of the finances of the Jagannath temple. And he found out that, it was all pretty chaotic, but somehow or other he managed to figure it out that the king had been borrowing money from the temple, because the temple was the place, and I guess is the place, where the most money is received. So the king, for some years, had been taking regular loans from the Jagannath temple, as we say, taking a loan on a no-return basis. Yeah, he found out that the king had been taking loans and not repaying them, because he was, like a jet setter, high-flying fellow, having parties and big sort of social gatherings on a really, really regular basis. And he had not repaid any of the money he'd taken, and it became clear that he had no intention of doing that. So Bhaktivinoda Thakura, as a fearless devotee, he confronted the king and gave him a bill and told him, you've got X amount of time to pay it back. The king, of course, because in those days, the kings were, even though the British were there, but the kings really had a lot of power. They still really had a lot of power. So the king, he got his bill and he was told he had to pay, and he was really not happy at all. So what he did, he decided to have Bhaktivinoda Thakura killed. Yeah. So he hired some tantric Brahmins, like black magic style Brahmins, to perform a tantric havan in the basement of the palace. It's like right out of the way. So it was a big yajna, 24 hours a day for 30 days, for 1 month. Finally, they came to the last, oblations, the conclusion, and the Brahmins were around this, big Havan Kund, and then the king and his family were around the Havan Kund, chanting the mantras. And then when the final offering of ghee was made, from half a dozen types of vessels pouring ghee in at the same time, with the final swaha, then the idea was, according to the tantric priests, at that moment, Bhaktivinoda Thakur should drop dead. He did not. But the oldest son of the king dropped dead, fell into the fire, crash, right into the fire, and died. Yeah. So then the king understood. Got to watch out for Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Don't mess with him. And then some payment terms were worked out. So in those days, well, he's deputy magistrate, so he's like the head of the whole legal system for the whole area. Maybe not the whole state or province or whatever it is, but a big area. And there, in those days, devotees, it was illegal to say that you were God unless you were. If you were God, it's okay, you can tell people you're God. But if you're not God, it was illegal to say that you are. So there were a few, actually, people who claimed to be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur had them arrested and tried. And the most famous one, his name was, I'm sure you're familiar, you know the name? Huh? Bhaktivinoda. Bhaktivinoda was a mystic, and he could do things like, he had very long and sort of, wild hair, and he could make like flashes of light come out of his hair. Things like this, sort of, And a lot of people were very impressed or struck by this. And so he had mystical powers. And he claimed to be God. Plus, he was trying to organize a revolution against the British. Bhaktivinoda Thakur had him arrested. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was not really so worried about trying to create a revolution against the British. Although the British, like the head magistrate and the other government officials there, the England, the Britishers, that's what they were worried about. Bhaktivinoda Thakur wasn't so worried about that, but what he was worried about was this fellow's saying he's God. And, he would do sort of really crazy and, what would you say, crude is not exactly the right term, but just low-class things like, he would offer to husbands that let your wife stay with me overnight. I will give her back to you as prasadam. And this was quite popular. And many of the men thought it was good. It was nice. Will you take my wife, please, for a night like that? So, but it's just too, incredibly crazy and degraded. So he was like that, you could say, just a really kind of bizarre character. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur had him arrested, and he was to be tried. ISKCON, because he was extremely popular because of his mystical powers, combination of his mystical powers, saying he's God, and being like staunchly anti-British, he was extremely popular, this fellow. So when he was arrested, then thousands of people came to Puri, to the court, and surrounded the court. And they were afraid they were going to attack the court and just take him out and, something like that. But that didn't happen. What did happen, though, was that ISKCON said that to Bhaktivinoda Thakura, you must let me go. Just drop the charges and let me go. If you don't, I will kill your family and you through my mystical powers, I'll make you all extremely ill and till you die. So his whole family became really ill. The trial went on for a few weeks, and for like 20-something days, ISKCON did not eat and did not drink. Yeah, this is like basically humanly impossible, particularly to not drink for 3 weeks. Yeah, but he did, and he remained strong, physically strong. But Bhaktivinoda Thakura, his family, became extremely ill. And his one daughter, her name was Madhurya Kadambini. She was right on the edge of leaving her body. And ISKCON is telling Bhaktivinoda Thakura, and Bhaktivinoda Thakura was just in a very debilitated condition. And ISKCON would tell him, drop the charges. You and your family will immediately be fine. But Bhaktivinoda Thakura would not do it. On the last day, when he'd already been found guilty, but now it was the day for his sentencing, Bhaktivinoda Thakura was so ill, he had to be carried to the court. And so the man was sentenced to, actually, I'm not sure how long, but some years in jail for claiming he was God, but mainly because he's trying to start a revolution against the British. And you've probably heard, I mentioned he had really long hair. You get some of these people, you see some of these people sometimes in India, they have really long hair. So long, it's like 20 feet long. And they have to roll it up and carry it. Yeah. I saw a photo once of one woman. She was standing up, at our roof level or a little higher, and her hair was coming right down to the ground level. So this fellow had really long hair, very unkempt, and every now and then he'd just start some flashing and things happening. So they started taking him out of the courtroom to the cells. And would you believe, one Britisher, just like a clerk in the court, he jumped on ISKCON from the back, and he had some real heavy duty scissors for really hacking away at things. He jumped on the man from behind. The man came crashing down, and he just hacked a lot of his hair off, just till the man looked like, I don't know what you'd say, but just kind of crazy. Like sometimes I say, like a punk rocker gone wrong. I don't even know if that's the right thing to say, but sort of a piece of hair here, another hair, and bald patches all over. Yeah. So anyway, and then he was locked up in jail, and after about 1.5 years, he died. Bishop Kushen died. But as soon as the clerk hacked off, quite a lot of the man's hair, right at that moment, Bhaktivinoda Thakur suddenly felt fine. And his whole family, they just, like, on the spot, within seconds, they completely recovered. Yes. So, now, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this is all going on in Puri. So after some time, well, of course, when he was there, he had this very big family. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, I forget exactly what number he was. He was like third to last or something like that. And the youngest child, Lalit Prasad, he was still living while, like, in the early 70s, while Prabhupada was preaching. And there's a whole kind of famous event. Prabhupada went and met with him, and he was still living when, like, at that time. So, but Srila Bhaktisiddhanta took birth in Jagannath Puri, and the house is still there, kind of still there. The place is still there, at least. When I first went there, 79, there's the house in front, and a kind of very simple temple at the back. Not like, a nice temple, but just something there at the back. And I remember, one thing I remember was at the front, sort of, there was like a little walkway. There's the building, a little walkway going inside on one side of the building. Then you'd go around and enter the building from the back, and the little temple structure was at the back. So there was a sign, such and such temple. And I remember very clearly indeed, there's such and such temple, and underneath in quite prominent lettering, this is not an ISKCON temple. Yeah, I remember that. So after a while, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, after a while means like in the 1880s. In the 1880s, he decided he wanted to go to Mayapur, Navadvip, because it's the land of Lord Chaitanya. So he applied, but they wouldn't give him a transfer to Krishnanagar, because Krishnanagar was and is the main, it's like a city or a very big town. If you know the area at all, you know where it is. It's not far from our temple. I mean, like, I don't know, 10, 15 kilometers or 20 maybe from our temple, less than 20. Krishnanagar. So he applied, and they kept refusing him. And eventually he said, okay, I'm applying for the last time. If you don't give me a transfer, I'm resigning. So they gave him a transfer to Krishnanagar. And there he was able to go around and visit so many of the places of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya. And he down, if you know the area at all, down from Krishnanagar just along, the road goes along basically the river. What's the river? Jalangi, the Jalangi River. And he located some pastime places. He located the place of the Surabi Kunj pastime, where Lord Indra came some time after the Govardhan Leela. Lord Indra came, and well, actually Lord Indra has a Surabi cow actually on Indraloka, and his Surabi cow, Indra was still feeling very bad for offending Krishna so terribly in the Govardhan Leela, even though Krishna told him that it's all right, don't worry about it. So, but he was still feeling very bad. So the Surabi cow took him, told him that I know a special place where there's a special form of Krishna who is the most merciful. And so I'll take you there and you can meet that particular form of Krishna, and then you'll really feel forgiven. So they went down to that place, Surabi Kunj, which is still there. Bhaktivinoda Thakura purchased it, and he built a small, like residential accommodation, really very small and very humble, but it's still there. It's still there. Where Bhaktivinoda Thakura lived at Surabi Kunj, and some of the other places there at Surabi Kunj, where there was a great banyan tree. So where that banyan tree was growing, that's on one side. And like this. So he bought that. And he was staying there for some time. And then he bought Swananda Sukhada Kunj, where he lived for the majority of the time that he was in the Navadvip area. It's just down the road from Surabi Kunj, about a few hundred meters, like 500 meters or something along those lines. And he built a double-story house there. And one day he was up on the balcony on the upper floor, and he looked across the Jalangi right over to the Mayapur area, because that's not exactly Mayapur where his house is, it's Godrum Dweep. So Mayapur is just across like a kilometer or a kilometer and a half further over to the north. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was standing there one time, and he had a vision of a grand, giant temple for Lord Chaitanya being there. And we understand this is now the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, which is being built in Mayapur. Yeah. So he was, one thing that he was doing, he was going around and visiting and locating different pastime places of Lord Chaitanya. And he would buy them. He would buy them. Like if you're familiar with Suvana Vihar, he bought it. And it's still owned by a Gaudiya Math group. And a few other places he just bought, like Champahati, and a number of other places he bought. So, but he really, the main thing which concerned him was that he wanted to locate the actual birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, the appearance place. And he was like he's highly intelligent and fluent in English and all these other languages. So he would go through old documentation and British documentation of, like, you know, where places are at different times, because the Ganges is moving all the time. So he was sure from studying those documents, he was sure that the actual birthplace of Lord Chaitanya was on the eastern side of the Ganges, whereas the city or town of Navadvip was and is on the western side of the Ganges. And in fact, devotees, you're probably not aware, maybe I shouldn't even tell you, but anyway, on the western side, there is another birthplace. There's a place there with a neem tree. And, you know, they say this was the neem tree that Lord Chaitanya appeared under. And all that, it's like a whole setup. Yeah. So, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur was sure that it's not actually the right place. So, but what to do? So he was going around visiting places, checking, but he wasn't really sure. He found a place, which is where the birthplace is now. He thought, you know, it's very likely to be the place, but he wasn't sure. So what he did, he took his Siksha Guru, Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. He took him there one day, and there they found not a hill, but just sort of a little rise in the land. I mean, not as high as from the ground to the ceiling here, just a little rise of land which was covered in tulsi. And Jagannath Das Babaji had been taken there by his assistant, who, if I remember correctly, his name was Krishna Das. He was a very big, powerful man, and he would literally carry Jagannath Das Babaji around wherever he went, and usually in a type of a basket. And Jagannath Das would just sit there and chant, and he would carry him. And Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, at that time, nobody really knew what his age was, but it was assumed he was approximately 130 years old. So he couldn't walk, he couldn't stand up. In fact, his eyes could not stay open. He or someone had to hold his eyelids up for him to see anything, because the whole body had like sagged. So anyway, they got to that place, and suddenly Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj leapt out of the basket and started jumping like 12 feet into the air, like he's going to touch the ceiling here, and just shouting and crying out to Lord Chaitanya. So in this way it was confirmed that this is actually the birthplace. So that was, when was that? That was 1890 something, 1891. And he raised the money to build a temple there, which was opened in 1895. And he went around personally, raised all the money, 1 rupee at a time. And you go to, like business people and say, can you please give 1 rupee? And they say, sure. Listen, I can give 100 or a lot more. And he would say, no, I just want 1 rupee. Just give me 1 rupee. So then he opened. So the first temple was, if you know the setup there at the birthplace, it's the building when you're standing right in front of the temple building, looking straight at the altar. It's the building on the right, which is now like their offices. That was the first temple building there for Lord Chaitanya. In 1896, he sent a book he'd written in English, and I mean really like good English, like basically like a native English speaker's English. Lord Chaitanya, His Life and Precepts. In English, he sent to a number of universities, particularly in America and Canada. And when Prabhupada told the devotees that these books had been sent in 1896, and he told the devotees in 1960 something, it's like, 70 years later or whatever, that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had done that. So the devotees went to try and see if any of those books are still in the university libraries, and they found a few. Yeah, and they stole them. Trust our devotees. So when he was staying at Surabhi Kunj, he started his Namahata movement and traveled around. I mean, by that time, I think it's 1890 something, he'd retired. He's like 60 or so years, 60 something. So he established many Namahata groups around Bengal and northern Orissa. And in a few of them, the devotees built like a center, a proper building. They built a center in a few of the villages. And when our devotees went around establishing Namahata, our Namahata movement in Bengal and northern Orissa, they met in a few villages. The village people were like very happy. Yeah, you want to have a program here? Yeah, have a program, great. And they said, well, we have a center here actually, a Hare Krishna center. And you can have the program in our Hare Krishna center. And the devotees went, and they found on the altar was a picture of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. It was one of the centers which he had established all those years before. And, when Prabhupada was building Mayapur in the very early stages, but, the building had started, there was one journalist who came to interview Prabhupada, and this journalist knew that on the other side there is a birthplace. So he said to Prabhupada that, so many people say the birthplace is on the other side of the river. So, why are you building it here? And Prabhupada explained, well, scripture says, and so many authorities say, and so therefore, we are convinced. And the man said, but if it's not here, if it is actually on the other side where, 90% or more of the people say it is the place, then you're wasting so much money. Building a whole setup, you're wasting so much money. Why are you doing that? And Prabhupada tried to convince him, no, it's not really like that, because it's authorized. We have this authoritative information. But the man wouldn't accept it. And finally the man said, listen, now if you keep on building here, you could waste so much money. And Prabhupada, there were a few American disciples there. Prabhupada pointed to them and said, look, you see these men? These are Americans. Do you think they would make a bad investment? And the journalist said, right, okay. So he basically accepted the idea. All right, so now last thing I'll just touch on is when he was working as a magistrate, what his program would be. He would take rest at between 7:30 and 8 p.m. Then he would get up at 10, not the next morning, devotees, 10 p.m. that night. He would get up, light his oil lamp and write until 4 a.m. At 4 a.m. he would take rest, again, till 4:30. Then he'd get up, 4:30, wash his hands and face, and chant japa. Then at 7 he would write letters. At 7:30 he would read. At 8:30 he would receive guests or continue reading. Then he would take his morning bath at about 9:45, 9:30, 9:45, and take breakfast. Breakfast consisted of half a quart of milk. That's half a liter, isn't it? Half a quart. Or is it more than that? Anyway, half a quart. You could Google it and just see half a quart. It's maybe...
A quart is 946 milliliters.
Oh, it's almost a liter of milk. Half a quart. A quart is 900. Yeah, so it's like half a liter of milk. 2 chapatis and some fruit. That was 9:45. Then about 10 he'd go to the court. He would always wear a coat and pants to court with double-sized tulsi neck beads and tilak. And it said he was very strong in his decisions. He would decide immediately. And he did not allow any humbug in his court. You know, like talking back or being a smart aleck or sort of spacing out, something like that. No upstart could stand before him. And he would shave his head every month. So, court would begin at 10 and it would finish by 1. Then he'd come home and bathe and refresh. And at 2, he'd either go back or he would stay home if he'd finished the cases for the day. He'd stay home and then translate. Either from 2 right through till 10, or no, 7:30. Or if he had to go back and do something in the court, he'd come back at 5. And then he'd have his evening bath and a meal of rice, 2 chapatis, another half quart, like half a liter of milk or so, and like a little sabji, something like that. So, yeah, quite a program he had, only sleeping like 3 hours a night, or 2 to 3, something like that. From from 8 till 10, that's 2 hours. 4 to 4:30, it's another half an hour. And that was it. 2.5 hours, maximum 3. So today, devotees, is his sacred appearance day. So let us pray to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur to have mercy on us little devotees trying to become proper devotees. Hare Krishna. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur ke. And before, can I just say, yes, devotees, as you heard from Tirumala Devi Dasi, that on, what day is it? On the 29th anyway, what? Friday is Bhadra Purnima. And we still have to do some more sets. So please, devotees, do some more sets of Srimad Bhagavatam. If you do, every set, believe me, Bhaktivinoda Thakur will smile on you. Srila Prabhupada will smile on you. And Lord Chaitanya will smile on you. So please do that. Please try to distribute some more sets. You know, people can pay over some months. So, you know, it can be done. It's not that difficult. But what an investment. What a transcendental investment for those who get it. And if you give a set, on that day, then basically you're on your way back to Goloka Vrindavan. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki.